Hi, I'm Felipe Falange. I am the lead developer and founder of Floating Origin Interactive, and we're working on our new project, KitHack Model Club.
So Felipe, how did this game come about? When did you first have an idea for this game?
It's kind of hard to put it in, like, there wasn't like a moment where the game kind of, like, the idea for the game landed on me. It was more like it grew, right? It evolved, I guess, kind of organically. I've always been fascinated by, generally speaking, all things that move and or make noise interesting. But like remote control vehicles have always been something that I've been fascinated by. I remember being a kid and just staring in awe at anyone who had anything remote controlled out in public. And I was too much of a kid to be able to afford any of those things myself. So it was always something that I've been interested in. That coupled with my continuous, I guess, desire of making a game where players can make stuff. It kind of grew from there. It's always been something that it's probably been a project that I would end up making at some point, I think.
Now, KPS is like known for being like hyper realistic, like almost like engineering, like accurate levels realistic. Building your model, is that like as close to realistic engineering as you're gonna get?
I think that it's kind of like what I call like above average realism. We're not taking like 100% like fidelity to real life. That's not kind of the point. The point is that it is a game that's based on like as realistic a physics simulation, to the point where that doesn't interfere with it still being fun. I think that's kind of like the balance that we're always trying to maintain. In that sense, it's very much the same line of thinking as it was in KSP, where we weren't striving for full accuracy, because you can get down a rabbit hole that way. You eventually, I think, stop being concerned about what is fun if you only look for realism, because there's some things in real life that are not as fun. Like in our game, you don't get sunburned from being outside too long. Like it would have been more realistic if you did, but I think that most people wouldn't consider that a fun feature. So that kind of thing, to various degrees, I guess, is kind of the balance that we're always trying to achieve. And this goes also like for the building parts, like which parts do we actually have? Like how intricate is the building? Like, do you have to worry about like voltage on electrical connections, or is it just like connecting stuff together and electricity flows? That's that kind of thing. There's always like a balance to find where it's deep enough to be interesting.
There's like realistic and then there's fun,
yeah,
right? Like
enough to not be like insulting, I guess, to somebody who knows what it's about, like for lack of a better way to put it, but also not so realistic that it would be daunting for somebody who doesn't know, or that would just be flat out unfun. The balance, yeah.
It's called KitHack Model Club, not KitHack Model Simulator. It's in the name. How many different types of vehicles are you going to have in the game at launch?
You can make things that go on land, things that go on water, things that go on the air, and anything in between. That's the best way to put it, because it's really up to you, like what kind of vehicle you want to build. But it's also kind of up to the parts that we have. So currently we have over 180 parts already. I counted yesterday, and I was impressed myself. And you can make a lot of stuff with that. Our goal is to continue adding stuff afterwards to expand the set of possibilities. So right now it's very possible to make all sorts of boats, cars, or wheeled vehicles, more generally, and things that fly. And you can also make rockets. We do have model rocket parts that you can attach. It's about as fun as you would think.
So what inspired the art style of the game?
So the art style, I think, is kind of also something that kind of evolved. When I started it, I knew that I wasn't gonna have a very large team, so the art style needed to be something that we could realistically manage with very few people. When I first got started with it, it was just myself, so the art style had to be something that I could manage on my own. So you have to make some careful choices there about how much art you can maintain, because yeah, with a team this small, if you find yourself hand painting normal maps on rocks, you're in a bit of a difficult situation. Like the design choices, I think they need to be able to let you produce content fast enough, given the size of your team. So the art style was kind of a consequence of that, but it's also like it's very much like the rest of the game. It tries to strike a balance between fun and realistic. We're not aiming for photorealism. It's not like blocky lo-fi either. It's somewhere in between.
Were there any games you looked to that inspired the art style or design?
In terms of the art design, I guess there's always games that inspire me. Like it's usually the latest that I've been playing. I think that one game that really did like lend its influence a lot in this one, perhaps not so much in art style, but in general, I guess feel, was Pilot Wings 64, like for the old Nintendo 64. I would play that game for hours and hours on end. And I remember like not doing the missions and just flying around. And I learned at one point that you could actually land on the gas stations around the map and it would refuel. And if you did that, you got to continue flying. So I would go on for hours doing that. And it was just like a lot of fun. So I've always had that, like, I think that was a big influence, even though the art style, like from the N64 to current gen graphics, like there's not a lot that maps, I guess. It was like the same, I guess, level of colorful type, like for the era, it was pretty realistic. So I guess, yeah, I would put it down to Pilot Wings, I guess, as like inspiration.
So, you did mention, you were fascinated by this, like this hobby, which is funny because in the mid 90s, my dad was really into this hobby. Like he built a boat, I believe, and it was a gas powered boat because these things at the time could be gas or electric. And I think gas just was so much more powerful, but he'd always take me to these hobby stores, right? If they're like hobbies, I'm like, oh, I thought like, like models and toys and cards and stuff, but it was just boats, airplanes, and cars. You mentioned you really liked that hobby. Did you ever get into it? Because that community is really, really interesting. Like they really go all out in their builds and how they build and why they build.
Yeah, and I think I got sort of into it like when I was in my teens, a bit before the Dangerous Fireworks game that spawned KSP. Me and my brother, we were actually in this like after school class thing. These days you would call it a makerspace. That's kind of what it was, but this was in the 90s. It was this like just really cool place that we went to in the afternoons. We would build model airplanes there, like out of balsa wood. And they were just small like chuck gliders because we were like 12 years old, I think. And you could see like some of the older kids were building radio control models. And that was like super cool to watch. And that was my, I guess, introduction to all things related to making airplanes. This is how that was how I learned pretty much everything about it, like how airplanes are built, how like why they have the shapes they have, like their proportions and everything. Like all of that, like I learned during that after school class, like on Monday afternoons when I was 12, and it was just the greatest. Like it was the best time. So that was my contact. But I used to work with like balsa wood models, and like they were like paper coated and everything. It was like this was in the 90s, but it was already considered old school by then. So like the latest, like when you watch videos of people making like flying RC models these days, like it's entirely different. But yeah, that's kind of how I got going, I guess.
No, you mentioned you have over 180 parts in your games to make customizable vehicles. Like how deep does that rabbit hole go in terms of like, do you have gas powered vehicles? Do you have electric powered vehicles?
So we have both of those now. We are looking into, we have ideas for alternative energy sources, things that you could find like, you can find like on YouTube, people making projects like that, like compressed air power and like rubber power, for instance, like that kind of thing could also become a thing in the future. But for now we have gas and electric. Those are the main fuel sources for now. Oh, and rocket power. You can also power things by rocket. And also, because the weapons have physical recoil, you could theoretically also power yourself by ejecting projectiles out the back. That's definitely also a way to do things. So yeah, all of that works.
Something new in this model industry have been drones. Those for like last decade have become more consumer friendly, and a lot of people have run them. Like, was that a discussion to put that? We didn't see them in the trailer, but that's a discussion you'd have with your team about putting drones in the game and whether or not they would be overpowered. Because I knew they have a lot more maneuverability than a boat, a airplane, or a car.
You're assuming it's a well-built drone. Yeah, you assume that it was built by somebody who knew that what they were doing. So there is no such assumption made. It would be theoretically possible to make a drone and tie the motor inputs to like pitch, yaw, and roll in such a way that like the mixing is done right. You could potentially control it like a quadcopter, but the motors don't respond as fast as they would need to, I think, because the current motors we have are your generic like DC motors. What we want to do, and this is probably going to be in an update after the first release, is to release a full set of helicopter and vertical lift powered devices, parts really, so that you can make things take off and land vertically, like properly, I guess, and maybe also add like parts to facilitate like the control systems and everything, because like you said, like for drones, like the big thing that makes them so powerful is the electronic control systems that keep them stable and everything. So that would be a bespoke feature that we need. I would like to have the time to do it properly. So it's not going to be included in the first release, but it's one of the very many things that we want to do afterwards as future updates. That's actually one of the topmost, I think, things we want to do in updates is like vertical lift and drones and helicopters and stuff.
So, like, what are some of the challenges when balancing something like that? Because, you know, you have boats and cars in the game. Like, how does the boat get to the car if they're on land to destroy the car? Like, where can some of those design decisions come in?
So that is actually, it all ties into like how we do missions at all in the game, because it's also open-ended. For missions, we actually made it even more open-ended. So the game actually has a full scenario editor built in. It's a tool so that you can make missions using the game itself, and it's powerful enough that it even supports scripting on top of it. So you can actually like you fully design your own missions in the game. So if you want to have something more like a structured, I guess, competition, you can set it up so that it makes sense, you know, like so that people are only using airplanes or only using boats, or like you can set up initial conditions so that players start in a reasonable, I guess, scenario for what you want to do. And that's the whole idea, is that also works in multiplayer, even live, like during a session. You don't have to have the mission published before you started. You can have like as the host of the session, you can act as game master and like live edit the mission, stop it and start it again, and make things happen, and everybody else will see it. Like if you place NPCs or put down like anti-aircraft weaponry on the ground, like those things can happen in real time, like to everybody else that's connected. So so there's a lot of different ways to have like structured gameplay on top of that sandbox, which is something that we're really excited about.
Now you are releasing on Steam. Are you going to have mod support at the release date? Are you planning to support that?
Very much. Yes. Yeah, that's already implemented. So yeah, we're going to have full workshop integration so that you can browse other player creations like vehicles, missions, and stuff like that, and also mods that can be like just you subscribe, they install themselves. It's pretty nice. And we've also been working on we have this whole setup where when you join a multiplayer session, the game needs to synchronize like the mods you're using with what the session is using so that you're able to join. So we have this whole system of mod matching.
So Felipe, when does the game come out, and what platforms are you aiming for at launch?
So at launch, we're targeting PC, Windows, and hopefully also the Steam Deck. And for launch date, I can't really confirm it yet, but it's going to be in early 2024. So that's what we're shooting for.
And then where can people go to find more information about your game? Do you plan an early access launch?
Yeah, so the main place to talk about the game is our official Discord, so that you can find it through our Steam page. There's a very big link there. No, in the sense that we're not going to release it under the early access banner, because I think that early access is something that if you don't really need to have your game in early access, you really shouldn't. Like you should, it's something to be avoided, I think, these days, because the whole early access landscape changed a lot in the last 10 years since KSP. Like I think that early access still works if you have like a proper like bona fide indie game where this is like literally the only option, and the game itself suits the early access like life cycle. then it could work. But it's something that if you don't need to do it, like, it's better for everybody, developers and players, if you don't do early access. So we're hoping to do like a full release and then put out incremental content updates in the future. But this is like this will be outside the early access category.